just for those of you I've had as students and those of you I have as colleagues and teammates and so on, it's wonderful to see you. And of course, my thoughts and prayers are with you all because the work that we're doing now is so unique. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that and what that means for everybody and all of us moving forward. The conversation started around this idea of leading in crisis. It's funny now, my perspective of what crisis is has changed dramatically, as I'm sure yours has as well. Crisis looks very different today than maybe back in September when I would get an email about something, or one of you in your jobs would have an email, or a parent or someone come in, or a staff member, and in your head it's like, oh, this is a crisis. That definition or understanding of what crisis and leading through it is very different right now, and we all know that. And hopefully none of you and your family and loved ones have been affected personally that way. But as I began to think about it, I began to think about this concept of leading in crisis and how important personal grace is during this time, because we have two different pathways that are fighting each other. No matter what role we have, and as I see different names on the screen here, and some of your faces as well, I realize that in all of our roles, we're being asked to lead. Whether you are a classroom teacher, whether you are working in the district office, you're a site principal, assistant principal, any of positions in between, we're all being asked to lead, but we're being asked to lead because of the challenge we're in a really isolated way. And I mean that not in that oftentimes in leadership, we hear that leadership is isolating. And I would say that as I've gone through different forms of leadership, there is a loneliness to it often. But the loneliness and isolation that's come because of social distancing, yet still conducting work, I think has been compounded. We see that so much more strongly and differently. In fact, just sharing in a personal, and part of this will be my personal reflections during this time, I've often found myself over the past, certainly month and a half, no less, wondering, are other people feeling the same way I'm feeling? So often when we're working in our workspaces, we're able to benchmark with other people, and we're able to know that, okay, how I'm feeling today is the way most of my teammates are feeling today, or at least some of them. But I was finding myself wondering, is everyone feeling, or is anyone else feeling the same way I am as we're trying to make some of these monumental decisions that we've never really had to attach to before? And so that concept of, does anyone feel like me right now? It was interesting. Yesterday, I was in as we all are, living in a Zoom conference, and there were about 6 other superintendents in the conference, and I was really the veteran of the group, and everybody else had been a first year, second year, third year, somewhere in that area. And during the conference, one of the superintendents shared that my week is mashed together. I feel like there's no difference between some of the days, and I actually find myself working into the evening and without much barrier of time, and it's affecting my family. But then she was so thoughtful in sharing that my best day of the week, honestly, is by the time late Friday gets there. And it was interesting because she was very honest with, by Friday night, honestly, I felt like my best self, and into Saturday. And during Saturday were great, and even Saturday evening, I found myself finding some energy, doing some things I like. But by the time Sunday around noon, 1 o'clock hit, I would begin to get this pull back to what I know the start of a week was going to be, and then the unknown that was coming with that. And as I was listening to her, I was like, wow, that's exactly the way that I've been feeling over the past month and a half in particular, even going through some of those same emotions. And so my reason for sharing that was, I don't know how all of you are feeling. And even in this format, normally those of you who I've taught, we've worked with, this is that time where I'd stop and I'd say, share, tell me what it is you're feeling too. And we become a community of learners with each other. And so today it's been more of, I'm going to take more of that time just to throw that out there to you and allow you to reflect with that. Because what I have found is that connects to the second part. And that is, how are we finding a way leading through this crisis and knowing that we really, what we don't know coming in our future, certainly in September, what that might even look like in August. But I think a key ingredient is, how do we provide grace to ourselves? How do we find grace? How do we inject that into our own daily lives? Because we know that we're at a time right now where we're going to need to have that best grace for everybody we're leading. One of the things that has struck me also is, and I'm sure without seeing your faces, I would know I'd see nodding heads. So often in the past 2 months, I have found myself in the position of trying to make decisions, and in the decision making, having this pressure of feeling that I have to be right. The decision has to be right. And I don't know that I've ever really felt that with the gravity that I have felt it in my entire career. This concept of having to be right. The challenge to that, the fighting force to that is the decisions we're having to make don't always have a right answer. In fact, it's one of the first times in my career where I felt like, okay, even though I feel like I need to make the right decision, no matter what decision's made, probably isn't the right one. Because there is no right one. It's what is most effective at the time. I've watched so many districts try to compare themselves to other districts. So many schools, we have 35 schools in our district, trying to compare themselves across the district. The reality was you have to, as leaders, really take that time to benchmark with what others, but then you really have to do what you know is best for your group, your team, your organization, and in essence, trust your skills in that time. Because the reality is, to say that there's one right decision, there's a miss there. And so one of the things that I've included today, and I know that Amy's going to be very kind to share the articles back out with you, is one of the first articles that helped me going back about a month ago was an article in the Harvard Business Review, The Elements of Good Judgment. And Amy's going to share that, so you'll all have the link to that. And although it didn't give me specific examples of, okay, this helps me right now in this one, it gave me that understanding of, okay, so many of the decisions are judgment decisions right now. And so what are some of the touchstones that I can go back to be helpful in realizing that I have to have grace, and that no matter how hard I work, no matter how much I research, it's going to be difficult to find a way to make that right or correct decision every single time. That led me to the second part of this, because remember, we started by talking about feeling isolated. It is more isolating. Our mindsets are more isolating. All of that work, yet so many of us now have been trained, and we've come up in education at a time where we've gone so far. You remember when so many of us, or at least when I started teaching, I have gray hair and a beard. The beard is new. That is not something I'm keeping, but I'm trying to give grace as we go through this. And so in the work of this, one of the things I realized was education used to be so isolating. You get your books, you get your key to your classroom, you go and you teach in your classroom. We've taken the better part of the last 15 plus years to break down those walls with professional learning communities and teams and groups, and really training ourselves to be different leaders. But all of a sudden, through this crisis, we've seen ourselves shift to this mindset to where it's much more difficult to do that. And so as we look for that grace, the second thing I'm really going to push all of us on is that we need to be intentional about finding support, that this is not work that we can do alone. Although we've been forced to be alone physically, the work can't be alone. And as the leader, we have to find ways to reach out to be that inclusive person in doing that. So I would challenge you on a second article that I found, and it's one that I have really kind of reinvested in, that is, who are those mentors that you look to when you're trying to make those decisions? So as we think about that decision making, looking for the right answer, who are we reaching out to? We're in our normal work environment. I can walk around all the different offices in the district. I can call principals. I can touch base with people. I can have a coffee. So many different things to gather information to help decision making. Now, at least for the first month and a half, oftentimes, I was in my converted dining room to an office trying to get that input to make decisions. And it felt debilitating at times. And so I realized that, well, part of the thing was I'd lost some of those mentors that were a natural part of my daily routine. So a second article I found was how to build a great relationship with a mentor. And it's also in the Harvard Business Review this past January. And so that's being shared as well. And what it did was it really, more than anything else, just triggered me on how important it was during this time to make sure I'm investing and reinvesting in those type of relationships with people. And that their voice in my head, their articles that they would share, their information really helped me feel not as isolated. As we think about grace, we have to give ourselves the grace because we're going to need to give that to others. I just heard the governor talk about our budget just before this. He had earlier today. The numbers that they're talking about, although he made it seem in the beginning like, hey, there's a pathway there that maybe not as bad as we thought, at the very end of his speech, he threw out a 10% cut. Well, that 10% cut is devastating and in some ways even greater than 0708. So at the same time, as I try to internalize that, and all of us do, we're all in positions of having to lead people around us. And they're going to be nervous and fearful and worried. And how are we going to go about our way, about our job, about our leading to make sure that we provide the grace that they're going to need in order to be helpful? The difference between 0708 and where we are today, in 0708, the budget was a challenge, but we had no question about kids coming to school. We had no question about our daily routines. We have both of those challenges challenging us as leaders right now. And so I want to stop because I know that this is not meant to be a full presentation, and we have two great other teammates to share some thoughts on this as well. But I want us to think about something. Over the past 3 weeks, as we've been talking about starting of school, things like grading, the end of the year, graduation, all of those kinds of things, every article or every newscast that it seems that we've seen over the past month and a half or 2 months, how many of them have started with the phrase, during this unprecedented time, these unprecedented times? And so we would all acknowledge, I believe, that they're completely unprecedented. History tells us to a great degree that they're unprecedented. And so we use the verbiage of that, we read that, we internalize that as learners. But the minute then we turn to our job and start to work, we begin to go back to routines, systems that may not match unprecedented. By way of example, I had great principals in my district, wonderful principals. And they began, a group of them got together and began to already start sending out information for the fall for their teachers on their professional learning community meetings and what dates they were going to be and what times they were going to be. And when they started to get pushback, like you could imagine they might have from staff members, they were confused a little bit, like, well, but this is what we've always done, thus not unprecedented. So one of the things that I realized was, as the leader, I had not given permission. This was a me thing. I had not given permission to the people I'm leading to think about doing things in an unprecedented way. To give them that permission to feel like, well, you're right, we may not be able to have those type of, by way of examples, professional learning community meetings like we've always done in the fall. We may need to approach that in a very different way. So if we're going to continue to use this concept of being unprecedented, then we have to think about unprecedented times in how we provide support and leadership to others and granting them that creativity and flexibility to go through that. Ultimately, that circles back to that, how are we going to give our own selves grace? How are we going to take care of ourselves, hold ourselves, be good to ourselves, so that we can be our best selves for others? I'm going to pause for just a little bit here, and I am going to look at my agenda because I know we want to follow this. I know we have Dr. Petria Gonzales, who is also a principal of the Corona-Norco School District, who's with us today, and I know she has some words to share as well. Dr. Gonzales, are you there?
Thank you, Dr. Plutko. First of all, thank you to you and Amy and Carmen for organizing this. It's really great of you guys and forced me to put on some mascara today. So thank you, you ladies that are here know what I'm talking about. I guess just kind of piggybacking off of what you had said, Dr. Plutko, couple things as far as grace. I think that nobody likes to say, I don't know. And this is a time that we get to say, I don't know. And people will accept that answer for a while. And it's okay to say. And so that's one thing, you know, I was thinking about and reflecting on as you were talking. Although that's frustrating, I think that's acceptable. Couple things that were a focus from my site in particular, and asking my staff was, I want you to do two things. And one thing is to relentlessly be relentless and to relentlessly connect to kids as much as you can via social media, the computer, Zoom, emails, phone calls, whatever that might be. And the other thing is to relentlessly chase our DF kids. One thing at the site, we want our kids to graduate. And I think that those were two things that we really made an effort here. And I think our teachers really appreciated that as far as the being relentless theme. And so that's kind of been our theme as we've moved forward. And really thinking about personal reflection for myself. When all of this started, I'm the type of person that's pretty level. I'm usually just the same all the time. And I don't have very many lows. It's very unusual for me to have a low just in my day-to-day life. But I was experiencing some lows where it would just sneak up on me out of nowhere, and I would be sad and all the or cry. I'm like, what is going on with me right now? And so, especially really at the beginning of the quarantine and trying to figure out what in the world we're doing, I think that in personal, just thinking back, those were some hard days, and not knowing what we're to do and not having a script, right? When you're talking about what is the right decision, it's you're right. There wasn't a right decision, and everybody, I felt that we leaned on each other to try and develop the right decision moving forward. In a lot of ways, that at the very beginning when we started to shut down schools, the go slow to go fast was out the window. We were moving so fast over those few days. I mean, just making quick, swift, district-wide decisions. And our district in particular did a great job communicating that not only to the principals, but then out to our communities. And so that was, we, I think, did a remarkable job being I'm from Corona Norco, and the size of the district, we are having one voice. And just the importance of that in a district our size, I think was really great. My principal, when I was at Diamond Bar High School, he used to tell me, never make a decision before you have to. And I use that motto, when necessary. But I think during this time, never make a decision before you have to has really resonated with me, because we want to make sure we are a unified front here in Corona Norco as high school principals, and we are the same across the board, and having the same systems and communications going out at the same time. And I think that's been really important. And as a principal, you want to make a decision quickly sometimes, but I think it's been okay to wait so that we're consistent. So those were just sort of my initial thoughts and reflections and listening to you, Dr. Plutko, and really thinking about today.
Dr. Lawe, are you there as well?
Yes, I am.
Awesome. Great to see you.
So like you, Dr. Plutko, I'm getting gray hairs too, but I don't have the beard yet. So
oh, well, good.
So, in reflecting, and this has been, like you said, unprecedented times. And so one of the things that I keep thinking about when we talk about leadership in times of, in challenging times and uncertainty, I always think of my father's journey, right, of being boat refugees and leading 79 villagers to escape Vietnam by boat, and going into the uncertainty, right, the dangerous jungles of Vietnam and the ocean, and not knowing where we're going, but taking that risk. And so it wasn't until I got into my leadership career and taking classes at APU where I realized, all that my dad has shared and all the stories of leading in challenging and uncertain times was, Koussis and Posner's 5 practices of exemplary leadership, that inspiring a shared vision with his people and modeling the way, enabling others to act, and challenging the process and encouraging the heart. So in these times, I kind of think about, what am I doing at my site level? Obviously, like Petria said, at the district level, we kind of follow the directive of our superintendent. I'm also with Corona Norco. And so, the whole hashtag of all in this together, we need to be that unified front. And so there's a lot of directives we take from, from the state, from the county, from our district. But as far as the site level, one of my focus and one of the things that I think is so important is the human connection. I know we talk about distant learning should not be a disconnect. And so prior to this pandemic, my focus has always been about building impact teams with my staff. And, my focus has always been on strong PLCs and building collective teacher efficacy. And so it was all about strength-based leadership, where everyone in the building, from certificated staff to classified staff, they lead from where they're at in the organization. So it was a strong focus of building that positive culture. And so when school closed, my focus, or I guess the question to myself, is how do I continue to build and maintain this culture of teaching and learning when we know that workplace culture is inherently a social construct, but now we're missing the social piece, right? The social interactions, the daily. And so to me, that was kind of a challenge of, well, how do I continue this? How do I continue to establish a narrative and dialogue with my staff, knowing that the health directives and the policies in the district, directives may change around us, but how do I keep it sending the same consistent, important message to my staff? One of my assistant principals shared a Gallup report just the other day, and it says the 4 universal needs of followers is hope, trust, compassion, and stability. And so what I've been very intentional about since school closed in mid-March was to continue to weave those things in to the narrative and constantly check in on my staff, whether that be picking up the phone, calling them and wishing them a happy birthday, to doing informal Zoom check-in where it's not business related. I do have a staff of 30. And so it's, hey, check in, what are you doing? And I poll them, how's their stress level? And we talk about those things, and we continue to build that culture even at a distance. And I kind of, as I was reflecting, I was thinking, I equate this to the analogy of me coaching a team where the players and the coach do not know how to play the game. And so, so not knowing the rules, I figured the best thing to do is to focus on the player and the idea of teamwork, and so that we can figure this out together. And I think that's why, we go around and we see a lot of that hashtag all in this together. I think it's very important, like you said, finding that mentor and leaning on, because even as a leader, I need that mentor as well. And I need to check myself before I can take care of my people. And that goes the same for our parents and community, making that connection, listening to them, showing empathy, giving grace. Students are very important. And one of the things that our counselors, we push a lot of social emotional learning and mindfulness, and our focus is mental health, especially with our students. And so since school closure, my 2 counselors have pushed a lot of mental health resources out for our students, for our parents, for our families. And at the end of the day, when you look at all this, you're right. It's all about decision making and getting this task done and getting this done and checking off all these lists. But really what we are is we're servant leaders, and we are here to serve our people and remove as many barriers and provide as much support. And so it's not easy, but you can't do it alone. You're right. We can't do this alone. And so we need to make sure that we lean on each other and we lean in to do the work.
Thank you very much. And certainly the both of you together and your comments as we do that. I'm going to comment on just a couple things, but before I start that, if you have questions, feel free to use the chat area to submit any questions about leadership type things that maybe you're thinking through, or concepts that you would be interested in hearing maybe a comment on. One of the things that I would like to go back to is that concept of how, as we think about giving ourselves grace, how important it is during this time to be able to be comfortable as leaders saying, I don't know. As Petria talked about that, I think there have been so many times where that has been a feeling of maybe uncertainty or a feeling that I'm not comfortable with, because I think we all work hard to be able to provide those answers and services to our teammates. But I think it's also really important that they also know that that's really not the case. It's a very honest impression to give that we're not sure right now. And that may change multiple times between where we are today and where we are a week from now. We've seen that happen so often. As we think about that grace part of that, for the past month or so, as I talk with our principals and other teammates, I've been using the kind of understanding or the question, if you will, or maybe the design of thinking of it on a scale. As we think about a scale, the scale being Maslow on one part of the scale and Bloom's on the other part of the scale. And who are we as leaders and what kind of a time we're in? Typically in any organization, and certainly the schools we're working in or the teams we're leading, I think we'd always hope that there was a balance between those. And we know that there are certain times where that may need to change, but that balance between Maslow and Bloom's on a scale, we'd want consistently in an organization. I'll argue that where we are today, as much as that content and that higher level thinking is so important as we think about Maslow, I'm sorry, about Bloom's, I think that side of the scale around Maslow, and if we ever have to err in our decision making, to tip the side of Maslow and to let that side of the emotional wellness, the emotional intelligence, if you will, the security that's in that side, take front and center. And if that means it's not knowing, if that means we have to start over, if that means coming back the next day and say, yesterday might have been the worst decision I've ever made, we need to start over together. And that's okay, because that's how fast things are changing. But that's certainly leaning on that side of Maslow over Bloom's. We want to do the research, to have the content and have all that information, but know that in the implementation, we're not always maybe sure what everybody else is going through in their own personal lives, both the people I'm leading directly, but also the people that they're trying to lead, from classroom teachers to our classified staff as well. And I hope that concept or that visual resonates with you about leading between the two of those. I'm looking to see if there are any questions that anybody has, or if anybody wants to type one in, or someone, maybe we can unmute someone if they have to talk about it. But I would like to have questions if anybody would like a chance to do that. I mean, I see high school principals on here. I see district office staff. I see elementary principals. Some of you leading high schools that are as big as 4,000 students. And so I know that with that comes huge staffs and teammates. So I'm just wondering if there are any thoughts or questions or observations that you might like to share in the chat.
Hey, Dr. Plutko, it's Gabriel Cardenas here. How are you?
Hi, Gabriel. For those of you who don't know, Gabriel is an elementary school principal who just defended his dissertation about a little less than a month ago. Gabriel, go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation for all of your, all three of you. I appreciate your feedback, and I wanted to add and touch base on the human connection piece. I agree. As a site administrator, one of the things that I've been doing is I've been making those personal phone calls to the teachers and support staff. And the feedback I'm getting from that is tremendous. They really love to hear from you personally, and just connect and offer the support you can, and also being transparent that if you don't know, you tell them you don't know, but you will work hard to get the answer for them. So just want to reemphasize the importance of that human connection piece at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. Yeah, that advantage of not reaching for the text first, but let's go ahead and make that phone call and have that personal connection, which I know we're all craving so much, that's for sure. Any other thoughts or observations or questions as well about anything, things you're working through that you're thinking about?
Hello, Dr. Plutko. This is
Hello, Seth. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Seth, high school principal in Corona Norco. As I mentioned, a school of about 4,000 students. There you go. That's Mr. Bond right there.
Yeah, we've got about 3,600 and change right now, but it's been a challenge leading in a time when the rules in which you were used to engaging are just different. And I keep thinking of the leadership of the items that are loose and tight, and the things that used to be loose are no longer loose, and they need to be tight so that we are moving together. We enjoy a fairly flat structure of leadership in our district, and for the most part, prior to this, we were kind of given the autonomy to make decisions for our school sites to do what we needed to move forward. And we kind of, at least at my site, and I know a couple others too, you get out in front sometimes and you think you're doing the right thing, and it turns out to be repercussions of those decisions are felt on other campuses and other sites. So I've spent more time on Zoom meetings with the comprehensive high school principals in our district than I've ever spent with other groups before. So it's interesting how neighboring districts and neighboring schools and decisions that are being made can sometimes be looked at negatively, and they affect the decisions that get made for others. So it's been a great learning opportunity, but it's there's definitely a learning curve to it that was unexpected.
Well, your description, thank you, Seth, very much for weighing in, because your description is clearly that push and pull between giving grace but yet leading forward, knowing that there are decisions that you have to lead, but everything. So I'll even give it from a superintendent's perspective. We are, as a district, being compared with other districts. Hey, we heard this district made this decision, or this, why are we making that? And so at some point there does have to be that personal confidence that we're making decisions for us and our group and our organization and our team that fit us. Not everybody's going to be the same. And as Seth said, if you did enjoy a flattened leadership style to where you had a lot of autonomy to make decisions on your site, and now it's much more funneled or directed because we need to go together on certain things. What that really means is the area that you now have more autonomy in and have to really lean out heavier in are all the relationship sides of that. Because while you will not have some of the decision-making side, you will have the relationship side to help people understand how these decisions are coming about, and why they're different, and why maybe Corona Norco is doing something different than Riverside Unified, and why those things would happen. And so, Seth, that's a great point. And that's why before you go to bed at night, make sure to give yourself grace, because that's not easy to do. That's a really difficult thing to do. It really is really difficult. Thank you for weighing in on that, Seth. Any other thoughts or questions?
There is a question that has come in from Amy Collier. She's asking, how do you see one-on-one site leader mentorship evolving post-quarantine?
Oh, wow. Amy, that's a great question. I think that one of the things that's going to come out of this too is, although currently we're making light at certain times about Zooming and all the Zoom kind of conversations we're in and so on, I think one of the things that's going to happen is we're going to develop a whole new skill set, whole new software systems, whole new communication styles that are going to allow us in some ways to reach out maybe in a more ubiquitous way for some of those one-on-one type of situations, because we're going to be able to meet people where they are in different time frames. So I think that's one part. I think the second part of getting back together, and we're working on this even right now in our district, is everybody's going to have no matter what it looks like coming back together in the fall. So Amy, your question about how do we continue building those one-on-one relationships in that? I think as leaders, we're always going to have to reach into people. For example, as I have come back into my office environment a little bit more, I'm in my office today at the district. My secretary was here today. I knew she was going to be here. I came in with my mask. I came in with a glove, using a glove with my keys, so she saw me use it. And then I stopped, and the first thing after checking on her with my mask was to ask her, what makes you most comfortable today? Even though our offices are apart from each other and there are doors and so on. And so I think as we approach any one-on-one relationships moving forward, I think as the leader, always making sure that we don't assume anything about how the person is feeling and what works for them, and then going forward. Because what I don't know is, I don't know if there's somebody at home that they're caring for that they're worried about, or someone at home who's maybe elderly, who they're maybe more concerned than my other person who I'm working with. So I think there's both sides to that, but I'm going to be really interested into all of the different software gains and all of the different skill sets even that we develop around one-on-one mentoring and just overall professional development that's going to come from some of these new technologies that we find ourselves being forced into. Any other thoughts, questions, statements? I hope that helped, Amy. Louis.
Hi, Luis Carrillo. I am I'm an interim AP over Eleanor Roosevelt High School in Corona, Norfolk Unified, and this is my 6 month into this job, and then COVID hit. So on the mentorship, for me, it's been just going in there and asking a lot of technical questions about the position and the do's and don'ts. I have found this time to really reach out even more so to those mentors. Like we just actually, I was on a Zoom call last night with Kim and Omar. We were up pretty late last night, just talking technical. But I think for me, I found more value in developing the relationships now because of so much uncertainty on how to lead from not being at the site. So so when I think about how is moving forward, I think this has given me the opportunity to start building even more relationships with mentors as we're quote unquote not as busy at the site. It's the accessibility we have now where we can jump on a Zoom. Well, hey, do you have a moment? Let's, or even text or even phone call. So even with my coach through my induction program, I find myself, we're chatting more and more between him and I. So as a newbie to all this and moving forward in my career, the mentorship, and I'm really thanking for the article on the building a great relationship. So I'm going to that's on my to-do list. So for me, I found this is a perfect time to build the relationship piece because like you mentioned and mentioned before, you just don't know what people got going on, and the ability to reach out to someone professionally as well as personally has been great for me. So it's my 2 cents.
Thank you for sharing that very much, and good luck to the mighty orange and blue there at Roosevelt. One of the things that came out of this, I'll give you a personal example again around this concept of reaching out and having mentors or finding people that maybe have been through something before. As we go into the start of school, there's a great unknown. Nobody's done the reentry to the start of school like all of us are going to figure out. That is something that has not been done. At the same time, the budget side of what we're going to have to deal with has been done. And so whether you're at the site level or at a district level or in between doing special work, there are people who we're going to be able to reach out to who have done that really successfully before and will have great strategies for us. But one of the things about mentorships that I realized early on was it was right before we went out, actually it was the week that we went out in March. And when that week, there was a brand new superintendent in San Bernardino County. And he'd been talking with another group of superintendents, and they were very kind to say, why don't you give Greg Plutko a call? He's working on some things, and he might be able to give you some thoughts. And so they gave him my number, and they told me that he might call. I reached out to him with the text and said, hey, would look forward to talking with you. It took the better part of a month. But when we finally connected, what really came out was he was feeling like he was imposing upon me, that he was pushing into a space because he knew how busy the work that I was doing. But the reality is that's true of all of us. It doesn't matter which position you hold at any time, it's relative to the work you're doing. We're all busy. And so, but that mindset he had about, well, I'm reaching out and I don't even sure what I'm supposed to ask him maybe. So 2 things. One, please know that people you're reaching out to, by and large, they really want that connection with you. I find that when people call me, because I'm re-talking things that I maybe have done before, thought about, it reinforces. When I was talking to him finally, when we got our time together, it wasn't more than 10 minutes in when we were talking, and I began to take notes about some of the things I was saying, because it's like, well, gee whiz, Greg, you're giving that advice, and you haven't done that yourself in the better part of 2 months. And so you realize that through those mentoring conversations, it's really a win for both parties. So if you have that feeling, or if you have had that feeling of, I'm not sure I want to interrupt, I don't know that I should, that's not enough of a reason to reach out. You'll know if there was a challenge there in some way. But take that risk, take that chance to go ahead and reach out. And then secondly, just go ahead and have a question or two or a thought or two, because it really will get people started along the way. So I do really encourage that, and I hope that article helps with that a little bit too. Other thoughts or questions?
If I can interject, if you don't mind.
Hey, Brandon, how are you?
Brandon, how are you?
It's great to see you. Is that a new beard too? Did you?
Yes, my coronavirus shield here, yes.
Well done.
Well, good to see you.
Good to see you.
I agree with everything. Dr. Gonzales talking about pausing, Dr. Law talking about reaching out, and you mentioning mentorship. I think that's all been great, and I definitely will echo that, and I've been trying to put that into action here. The other thing that I think this pandemic has created is it's forced us to move into the 21st century with our technological tools and be more efficient. There's some things that we've been talking about in Walnut Valley in regards to how come we haven't been doing this already? We've kind of been doing it in an archaic fashion. So the challenges that I've seen in my new capacity now as Director of Secondary Education is kind of maneuvering through the political messaging that changes, with the wind right now, based on, and it depends on who you're listening to. If it's the media outlets or if it's our local legislators, you have to be cautious. But kind of maneuvering through that process to keep our staff calm and optimistic about, that we're going to get through this together. And so I guess that's my statement, but also my question: do you have any advice on how to maneuver with all the different political messaging going on?
It's hard, and you're right, because even just yesterday, you think about the starting of school, and you look at it in a national way, and in a national way, you hear Dr. Fauci in the role that he has, having served across multiple presidential administrations, saying, "Hey, let's be careful about how we come back," something to that effect. And then the President Trump, who then said, "Hey, wait a minute, I have a different expectation. I see us starting back in the fall." I mean, we can think back just 3 weeks or so ago, Brandon, when the governor out of nowhere said, "We're going to all be coming back early in July." That was a completely off the cuff statement that even in my district, all of a sudden the emails start flying from parents about, "Hey, I hear we're starting in July." But yet he hadn't talked with anybody. That was just an off the cuff statement. And so I think your point is well taken. What they need from us as leaders in that communication part, first and foremost, is we have to be honest. There is a directness. There is I don't even know if honest is the right word. We have to be factual. And if that means we present both sides to something and say, we don't know the answer, we're still studying, then that's what we present. But that factual part, I believe, is what people are craving. People have, in these times, people will know whether we're just providing it's hope, but it's flowery hope. It's hope it's pie in the sky hope. There's a difference between providing hope as leaders, something for them to grab onto, something for them to take to use, and something that they realize, that's not even really possible. They're just saying that. And if you get too far to that side, you lose them. And so I think that ability to be direct, factual, people need to know so they can make decisions. Part of that is saying we don't know yet, and we're still planning. And one of my favorite ones is with parents in particular, we don't know yet. Let me ask you a question. Do you have any ideas? Because what you find a lot of times when I call back on many of these emails is it's more of a chance for them to vent. They don't have an idea either. And it helps us both get to the place of, yeah, this really is difficult, isn't it? Well, thank you for the call. Thank you for that time. We both agree that it's difficult, and we'll keep communicating with you. But I appreciate you asking that question, Brandon. I think that's a big challenge. But I would certainly say provide the hope. Don't go beyond what probably is realistic with the hope. And then also being factual, because I think people need facts during this time as best we can give them. Thank you, Brandon. It's great to see you, by the way.
Great to see you as well.
Yeah. Anyone else? And to Amy and Carmen, I'm not sure what our timing is. We're just kind of going through this here.
We have about 15 minutes left, or actually more like 5.
Okay. It seemed like 15.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to add anything or contribute or question or share something?
I'll share, Dr. Plutko.
Hey, hi, Robert. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic.
Great to see you.
So one of the things that we're finding and going through all of this is there's some silver lining to be had here for sure. You of course have your persons who haven't been inclined to embrace change or to embrace the new kind of student who is adept to technology and so on and so forth. And this has been a proving ground for that learning experience for them. And so the bond that's being made on our school campuses between the teachers who have jumped right in and are just zooming past everyone, pun intended, I guess, they've been able to help those who have had an apprehension and a fear. Now's the time to get through all of that, because as we go into the new unknown, there is a likelihood that we're going to be having to tap into some of what we have been doing to, piece together some sort of hybrid approach in the coming school season. And so that messaging that you talked about, where, hey, it's okay to try, it's okay to make mistakes. Now we need to be creative and to give people that freedom to help them not be as apprehensive and scared. Like you said, we cannot apply what our current structure and what our current preconceived notions of how we attack a problem. That doesn't apply here because it is unprecedented, like you said. And so you have that newfound freedom with the staff to not only think outside of the box, as it were, but think outside of your zip code, because that kind of creativity is what has helped some staffs and some curriculum teams pull together to piece together this haphazard approach on the fly. But now that we've been doing this for several weeks now, things have been gelling, things have been coalescing, and my teams are now at the point, it's like, hey, this is working. We're checking and our students are making progress. We're in some pretty good shape. All those fears that we had that students were going to be falling by the wayside, students falling through the cracks, it's not happening. We're actually connecting well with our students. And so there's a bit more optimism amongst our teams and looking forward to the unknown of next year. They're no longer afraid of, well, are we going to be coming back as we knew it? Or are we going to be coming back as what we're doing now? Or is it going to be like a mix of both? They're not scared of that anymore because in their minds, they've done the worst case scenario of what they're currently doing and having to throw it together all of a sudden. Now that they're comfortable with that, well, anything else is just somewhere between what it was and what we have now. So there's a comfort there. And I think it's important that the site leaders remind teachers of that. Because in their minds, they've already passed that. It can't get any worse than this. At least that's where their headspaces are right now.
Well, we've made progress probably that we weren't sure that we could. I think it's amazing, that old video that you see of the rebuilding the plane in the air. At one point that was an amusing example of the change process. Now it's the reality of the change process. If you have not seen that or used that with your staff or others, it helps parents, everybody. It's an old video and you can get it, rebuilding the plane in the air. It's an old commercial, and it's just something to think about. I want to end us today with thinking a little bit about what so many of you commented on. As I think about what Gabriel and Seth and Brandon and Amy and so on, as we had the different Roberts you talked about, one of the things is that feeling of I got to make the right decision, and there's pressure that comes with that, and the grace that we need to give ourselves. And there's a saying that I remember having as a middle school teacher, and I got it back when I was in my credential class, and it was the only rule I ever had as a middle school teacher in the classroom. I had no classroom rules. I had this up on the board, and that was it. It was, what do you want? Give it away. You'll get it back. What do you want? Give it away. You'll get it back. I think we're in a time frame right now around decision making where we know that every decision we make is challenging, different, unsure. We might even find out a day after we made it that I shouldn't have made that decision. I should have done this. I should have. I think we need to think about that too with all the people we're leading, where we want grace in those moments when we make those decisions. We need to be the givers of that grace and the example of that grace to others as they make, because their decisions too they're feeling the same way, even as a classroom teacher. or as a custodian or as a front office worker, you pick it, in any role, they're feeling the same. So as we think about what do you want, give it away, you'll get it back. That is such an important model of our leadership, I think, at this point. And I just want to leave you with that one last thought here of, if we're going to call it unprecedented time, if we're going to use that phrase and everybody's willing to use it, then we need to give ourselves grace, and we need to encourage our own thinking and decision making to be that around maybe doing something unprecedented, something that maybe we have not done before. And that may involve giving people grace, giving people, certainly the grading that we're doing for our students is unprecedented now. And so we need to also do that in the daily routines that we've become used to in school, and help that maybe be a driver as we begin to work back into what school could look like in the fall. I wish you all the very best. I was not exaggerating when I say all of you are in my thoughts and prayers. The work that we're all having to do collectively, if we all put our hands out and hold hands right now, we need that. We need to be able to have that strength collective of one another. If I can ever personally be of help or support, please do not hesitate in reaching out. I'll help in any way that I can. I want to thank both Kim and Petria for being great models for us today and sharing their expertise and the work that they're doing on their campuses. And as always, certainly thank Amy and the wonderful Carmen Fairley. We know that she is very much a backbone of so many people in the work they do in the educational program at APU. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody. Good luck, good thoughts, and take good care of yourselves. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the day.
And Carmen will be sharing some details on the program quickly.
Thank you. Nice cat, Carmen. I like the cat.
Move her. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I see a lot of familiar faces, current students and alums. And I always appreciate seeing your names, even if I can't see your faces. This event was hosted by, or is hosted by, the Department of Educational Leadership, specifically the doctoral program. And I'm just going to share some details about the program in case anyone is interested or knows somebody who might be. Let me go ahead and share a slide that has more information. So our doctoral program is a 3-year dissertation embedded program. It's 51 units. You complete a chapter of your dissertation beginning in your second semester all the way until the end. So far we've had 100% completion. So we're really proud of the way that this program has been built. All classes are held on Saturdays, typically 8 to 6. It doesn't sound that bad. I mean, it sounds bad, but it's really not. There are a few people in here can talk about how you usually get used to that day. There's 6 Saturdays meetings in the fall, 6 in the spring, and 4 in the summer. We're currently accepting applications. The deadline is June 1st. And because you attended this event, you can have an application fee waiver for the $45 fee to submit your application. And that code is right here, SOE19. The cost is right here, the $1,055 per unit. And tuition over 3 years is about $53,000. Again, my name is Carmen Fairley. I'm the administrative manager for the program, and my email is listed. And I think my name was on all of the emails that you received. So feel free to give me a call if you have any questions about our program, or want to connect any of the speakers here today. Dr. Plutko teaches in our program, and Petria is soon graduating, and Kim is a alum. So I can connect you to any of them if you would like. Again, thank you for being here.
Carmen, can I just say one thing?
Sure.
You guys have got to do this program because it's amazing and it goes by so fast, and the first year's a little rough, but once you get through the first year, like, you can do it. And trust me, I know I don't know everybody on here, but if you knew me, for me to sit here and say, do the program, it's fantastic. So I didn't mean to cut you off, Carmen, but I had to put a little, like, you got to do it. You got to do it. You got to do it. So that's all.
I think they believe your word over mine. So thank you for your input. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions about the program, feel free to email me or send a chat in the chat box. But thank you, Dr. Plutko, again for your presentation. And as a parent, I have a kindergartner, and bless all of you for the work that you do. I'm just trying to get my child to write 3 sentences, and it is a struggle. So bless you for all of that you guys do on an administrative level, on a teaching level. And I pray that these kids go back in the fall.
So do we, Carmen. We do too. And just to anybody who is still on, who is thinking about joining the doctoral program and considering that, I also will be more than happy if you want to email me. My email address, you just look on the Placentia Yorba Linda Unified School District, and you can get my email. And I'll be more than happy, just introduce yourself, and I'll be more than happy to talk with you about the program. As Petria has said, I know I see Gabriel still online too. They both just defended their dissertations recently. The doability of the program, and at right now, I will say this: not only the doability, but the success rate of the program would be certainly, easily, without a doubt, one of the highest in all of Southern California, if not beyond that. And I think that has a lot to do with the personal touch of the program and the design. So if you are interested, I'll be more than happy to connect with any of you, and we can Zoom or have a phone call later as well. So I just wanted to add that as you shared that as well. Thank you.
All right, well, that is our time. Thank you so much to Dr. Plutko, Dr. Kim Lawe, Dr. Petria Gonzales for your time, and everyone for tuning in and engaging in the discussion. We really pray that you received some valuable nuggets today, and I hope you were encouraged by this time together. Please go ahead and like our Facebook page as well. You can be alerted for future events and opportunities. And thank you again for joining us, and have a wonderful afternoon.